Hello and welcome to my reading from Julius and the Magic Ears. My name is Barbara Michaela Muench. I'm an expert on the subject of hearing. My main occupation is to deal with people who do not hear very well and with professionals who have to support them with highly sophisticated technical products. In other words, I usually look at hearing from the professional and rather serious side. Our hearing organ is one of the most important, if not the most important sense. Immanuel Kant once said, "Not being able to see separates people from things. Not being able to hear separates people from people." Hearing is the foundation of communication. But it is also very fascinating how we hear and what we can hear. I know the serious side of the subject very well, so today I'd like to share with you the more cheerful view. In my book, a boy with an as of yet undiagnosed hearing loss embarks on an adventurous listening journey. It's a classic adventure story. He's supposed to find the princess of Dreamland who's held captive by dark forces, and it is teeming with fantasy characters and magic. But what makes this story different from many others is the focus on listening. Julius, the title character, finds magic ears with the help of the mysterious cat Cleo and has to accomplish many tasks that involve listening, hearing, and other more or less audible impressions. I would like to start at the point where Julius finds the magic ears with Cleo in the forest. Cleo had sat down again and watched him closely. He now held the box with both hands. It seemed to be getting heavier and heavier. Julius had to kneel down to hold it. Suddenly it got warm in his hands. It became strangely bright around him, and he heard a very soft whistling and buzzing sound. He merely thought, "Please open." And in that moment the lid slowly slid off. Julius could hardly believe his eyes. The box was lined with blue velvet inside and contained two strangely shaped objects that emitted a silver glow. He'd never seen anything like it. Carefully he took out one of the pieces and took a closer look. In his hand it seemed to change color, almost transparent, and seemed to have a rich inner life. Julius looked at the cat questioningly. Cleo nudged on the lid of the box again. "Oh yes, the poem," shouted Julius. "Auris ombra." He thought about it for a moment. The poem sounded Latin. Auris, the ear, cor, the heart. That's all he understood. Then he carefully held the small object against his ear and heard a voice at the same moment. "Would you finally put this in so we can speak properly?" He stared at the cat in confusion. Cleo had spoken and he could hear her with this thing. "Come on, put it in your ear." Julius carefully turned the mysterious thing and tried to put it in his ear. "The other ear," Cleo said. "You have a left and a right ear, don't you?" He tried it on the other side and really it slid in easily. "Finally," Cleo said. "I thought you wouldn't understand it before next week." Julius was still confused. The cat seemed to guess what he was thinking about. "You opened the box with the power of your thoughts. Now you're in possession of the magic ears. Come on, put the second one in too." Julius obeyed. He heard a very tender rustle. A small robin was sitting across from him on a branch, cleaning his plumage. Curiously, it looked over to him every now and then. Cleo continued. "With the magic ears, you can hear very soft noises and understand the language of the animals. But not only that, for example, you can hear what people say when they are far away from you. You can listen to almost anything you can imagine. But there are also dangers. Don't ever try to hear colors. And the greatest danger are the two characters you've met here yourself. Who are they and what do they want? Julius asked anxiously. Dorcan and Estrella, and of course they want to have the magic ears. That's all I can and want to tell you today. Julius looked down thoughtfully. Oh yes, I almost forgot. You can wear either both magic ears or none at all. And now please stop making such a worried face. There are wonderful things to hear. Cleo was right. The opportunity to be able to hear so many new things was very appealing to Julius. He pocketed the box, which now seemed light as a feather to him, and made his way out of the woods behind Cleo. Shortly before the forest road, Cleo stopped and looked around in all directions, but there was no danger, and the two of them cheerfully walked through the forest. In a small clearing, they saw a group of rabbits, and while Julius was still thinking about whether rabbits also have a language, he heard Mother Rabbit talking to her youngsters. Don't eat too much fresh greenery. The first green leaves of the year give you the squirts. And please stay close to me. I definitely smelled a little bit of fox earlier. Julius had to laugh. It was hard to believe. For a long time he roamed with the cat through fields, woods, and meadows. He looked at everything with completely different eyes and listened to the various sounds of nature. Julius suddenly recognized robins, tits, finches, thrushes, sparrows, and nightingales by their singing. Without the magic ears, he'd have heard an undefinable peep. If there was a rustle in the bushes, he tried to guess which animal was hiding there. He wouldn't have even noticed before. He could hear what the birds were telling each other. He could hear the fox's stomach growling while it was watching the rabbits. He could even hear two ants talking about their work. And when they came near Julius' parents' house and he wondered what his mom was doing, he heard her talking to a friend on the phone. The rest of the day, Julius was busy listening to everything that seemed to be of interest to him. He went into his room and closed the door. Then he thought of all the family members in turn. Dad was in the shower. Julius heard the water splashing. Even heard Dad soaping himself and the radio running in the background. Mom was in her room sewing. He heard her cutting fabric with the scissors, the sewing machine rattling, and the tin with the pins falling to the ground. Mom said something he'd never be allowed to say. And he heard Cleo too. She lay on her favorite armchair, half asleep and purring. It was an eye-opening experience for Julius. The only thing he didn't hear was when his mother knocked on the door. He had fallen asleep over the many new impressions. Cleo then tells him the whole story about a castle in the Dreamland and the kidnapping of its princess, Lililea. He also learns that he is destined to set out and find Lililea. To do this, he must cross the 4 elements and face several adversaries and dangers. Fortunately, he is not alone. He has a funny imp and a little witch by his side. Lililea is trapped in a world that is the exact opposite of a world of hearing. It is comparable to a state of hearing loss. It's really quite dramatic. The journey there is exciting and varied, and now I'll read you a bit about the friends' experiences in the element of water. They are traveling on a raft they built themselves. I'm Scylla, the princess of the Lake Kingdom, and I would like to help you to accomplish your great task. She beckoned on to the friends to follow her. The boat turned around, and the three of them stroked after it. The water lilies divided in front of them to shape a narrow waterway and closed immediately behind them to an impenetrable carpet of flowers. After some time, a rock with an opening emerged from the fog, and the raft smoothly floated into the opening. The narrow entrance quickly opened to a huge grotto, which was the empire of Scylla. The wildly fissured ceiling and walls shone and sparkled as if inside a gigantic crystal. Without seeing anything, they could feel and hear soft music, like harps and fine bells. Boat and raft moored at a quay shimmering in glass. Small, colorful fish swam underneath. The water here was so clear that they thought they could see into infinite depth. Scylla and her entourage went ahead. The three friends followed. Through a majestic portal, they entered a dazzling crystal palace with a large table in the middle. Scylla took the biggest chair at the head of the table. The friends were seated at her side. One of the nymphs brought in a fist-sized muzzle, which Scylla held close to Julius' ear. "What do you hear?" she asked him. Julius was carefully listening. "I hear a quiet bubbling, a rhythmic sound, like someone sleeps underwater?" he asked hesitantly. "Excellent," Scylla praised, and she told the excited friends about the treacherous water snake Asolan, who could be in different places in all the waters at the same time and was completely unpredictable. She was sometimes helpful, but most of the time she posed an enormous danger. If you ever see her, never be frightened. At least don't show that, then you're lost. As soon as she sees that someone is scared, she opens her huge crocodile mouth and swallows you up with a single bite. But if you remain calm and relaxed, you can negotiate with her. The friends looked at each other, very much perplexed. Julius said, intimidated, "If possible, I don't want to meet her at all." "It doesn't have to be that way either, if you cross the water kingdom in the right order," Scylla replied encouragingly and explained the way. It all sounded very simple. Above all, one had to listen to the different types of water and to cross from the smallest waterway over the lake of the three waterfalls to the sea. And the fact that a small river sounds different from a waterfall, and that this in turn makes completely different noises than the open sea, was clear to everyone. Nevertheless, Julius had the feeling that something was wrong, and he should soon find out what. I promised you that there would be adventures and dangers, and you are probably all curious to know what the water snake is all about. By the way, it is depicted in one of my hand drawings in the book. I'll show you. So, Asolan. Here we are. It doesn't look that frightening, but let's hear what it's all about. After they slept until the late morning, Julius, Estrella, and Schwips set off with mixed feelings. On the one hand, they were encouraged by the experiences with the nymphs. On the other hand, the concern about a possible encounter with a snake was omnipresent. Julius had used the magic ears as a precaution. He had them in his ears all the time to capture the sleeping sound of the snake. In a way, this sound was calming, because as long as the snake was asleep, it could hardly be dangerous. He he thought. They said goodbye to the gracious nymphs and pushed off in the raft. Leaving the glittering grotto behind them, they poled back on the river. Estrella voluntarily took the lead. According to her own statements, she would not be afraid even when she saw the most horrible things. Apparently, she knew what she was talking about. Schwips was able to make himself invisible in an emergency, and Julius was very happy to be able to concentrate on listening. He tried to suppress the thought of the snake. For half a day, the raft moved calmly at its usual speed on the water. Asolan seemed to sleep undisturbed, but the three friends kept watch attentively. Imperceptibly, the current got stronger, and in front of them, the river forked. Estrella looked at Julius questioningly. He listened very keenly and pointed to the left. The sounds of Asolan sleeping seemed to be louder in his right ear. And to the left, the branch of the river widened and the waters got calmer. But as their raft moved to the left, the sounds of snoring suddenly became louder. He shouted in horror, "Turn around quickly!" Schwips pushed the rudder aside so that they drifted to the shore where they could turn around and work their way back upstream. It was very strenuous. After a while, however, they managed to reach the fork, and with some effort, they were able to drift again in the other branch of the river. They breathed a sigh of relief. The sleeping sound of the snake had become quieter. After some quiet gliding along the river, an ever louder noise in the magic ears mingled with the sleeping sound of the snake. The waterfalls, Julius thought immediately. Suddenly he became aware of where the catch was. The waterfalls were so loud that they masked the snake's sleeping sounds. It was impossible to find out if it was still sleeping or not. Totally distressed, he tried to concentrate on the sounds of the snake. He could hear them, but at the same time he did not realize fast enough what was going on around. They were actually drifting towards the waterfalls at a speed at which they could no longer control the raft. One could already hear the roar. The river had turned into rapids. It was obvious that these would soon pour into the lake. It all happened very quickly. The roar of the many waters around them made it impossible to exchange words. The three friends looked at each other, stunned for a moment, and the raft plunged into the rushing depth. Wow! Do you wonder how this continues? Trust me, there is much more to come. There are so many things to hear and to experience until Julius finally meets the princess. I won't tell you more. Of course, I hope you will read the book yourself and get involved in listening experiences in the most dazzling colors. Have fun, and thank you for listening.